Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you for your leadership, especially during these challenging times. John, thank you for your hard work and your leadership as well. All of us know this year, the last several months have been extraordinary. That what we're facing, none of us have ever faced a confluence of challenges like this before. We're all dealing with a global pandemic, discovering modern mask chic, which has changed how every one of us lives our lives. We're also facing economic challenges on the order of the Great Depression. 44 million Americans who've lost their jobs. None of us have seen economic challenges like this in our lifetimes. And just when we thought that those two national disasters weren't enough, we have seen enormous racial divisions really pulling at the fabric of this country. It was obviously triggered with the horrific killing of George Floyd, a Houstonian. And in the immediate aftermath of Mr. Floyd's killing, I will say it was encouraging the unanimity with which everyone condemned what happened. Across the political spectrum, every observer who watched those 8 minutes and 46 seconds with the officer's knee on Mr. Floyd's neck, it was indefensible. There was no law enforcement justification for a man who was handcuffed and incapacitated and begging for his life. We were all horrified at what happened. And that's a call for reform. That's a call for all of us together to look at ways to make sure that our justice system is more fair, that we are providing equal justice under the law, that we're protecting everyone regardless of skin color. We saw then in the aftermath of that, protests across the country, people exercising the First Amendment right to speak out at the injustice. And then sadly, in some of the protests, we saw violent criminals really taking advantage of and exploiting those protests and using them as an excuse to engage in acts of violence and destruction, and in too many instances, murdering police officers across the country. And, I will say I was proud of Houston. Houston's my hometown. I love this city. I was proud of Houston of how we have dealt with each of these crises. On coronavirus, I think we have been smart. We've been proactive. We've managed to keep the numbers far more under control than many other parts of the country. On the economy, I think we've also been smart, trying to lean in and help businesses reopen. And when it came to the racial divisions and the anger, we saw a lot of free speech here. But thankfully, we did not see nearly as much violence as some other parts of the country saw. And that's a testament, Chief, to our police officers. It's a testament, Mayor, to our community, to who we are, that people engaged in speech but didn't take it to the next level of violent destruction. And my hope is we use this moment of time, this moment of enormous challenges, to step forward with good, reasonable, common sense solutions. I think the mayor has done a good job looking at issues here in Houston and trying to adopt policies, use of force policies that make sense. Nationally, John Cornyn and I are working together along with our colleague Tim Scott on the Justice Act that's designed to do a whole lot of things, including creating a national database so that if you have an officer with severe disciplinary problems who keeps getting in trouble over and over and over again, and that officer is applying at a different agency, that the agency will get access to those records, to see those disciplinary records, so that you know if you've got someone who's got a problem disciplinary history, that they're not just going to be able to move from one agency to another. Another important element of the Justice Act is body cameras, and creating strong incentives for body cameras to be worn. I look at at body cameras a little bit like criminal technology such as fingerprints or DNA. That as each of them were introduced, it moved us closer to truth. If you have an officer who's breaking the law, who's committing a crime, and I am glad that the officers in Minneapolis are being charged for what happened to George Floyd. But if you have someone breaking the law, you want that video to have that evidence to know what they did and to hold them accountable. And one would hope also the body camera is also a disincentive to anyone breaking the law. But at the same time, if you have an officer who's falsely accused, that body camera can prove the very best friend that officer can have. Because if their conduct, as the vast majority of officers' conduct was consistent with law, then that body camera can exonerate them. And so I think for all of us, we want to have a record. George Floyd, tragically, had there not been a video, I think it is likely no one in this room would know Mr. Floyd's name. It is only that video that made people realize the horror of what happened. And so I think having videos is important. Let me just say finally, in reforming the system, in putting in place steps to ensure people's lives are protected and protected fairly and equally without regard to skin color. And that is a critically important imperative of justice, especially today on Juneteenth, of all days. We also need to make sure not to give in, I believe, to some of the angry voices that are just demonizing police. Houston, we have an incredible police force, and I believe the vast majority of officers step up to serve because they love their community and they want to keep people safe, they want to protect people. And it is easy for this debate to turn into police are the bad guys. And that's harmful. That is harmful not only to law enforcement, but it's harmful to our communities. And so I have great optimism. Houston is a problem-solving community. Houston is a city where common sense, where we work together. And so I'm grateful for this roundtable to hear from leaders around the table and discuss these difficult but really important questions.
Thank you, Senator.